How did you get to New York City?
How did I get to New York City? In a way, I always wanted to be here because I grew up in such a small town that I was always looking for the bigger town. And for a while, that was Seminole, Oklahoma. That was Ada, Oklahoma. That was Norman, Oklahoma. And I thought those are paradise. And then I finished grad school and I moved to Rochester, New York. And I'm glad I did. But I'd always wanted to be in New York. And after going to grad school in Rochester and then going to the Aspen Music Festival, I suddenly knew a lot of people here. And I auditioned for a job as like a beginning coach at the Juilliard Opera Center, and I got it. So I moved down here and I worked at Juilliard. Again, I was basically a staff pianist and coaching. And I started freelancing in the city as well. And I loved it. Because people have always found me a little unusual, a little too direct, a little too open about my private life. And suddenly in New York, I was kind of normal, you know? No, I had a great time. I moved here in 1994, pre-Giuliani. And I'm so glad I experienced that.
Your small town. We talked a little bit about where you're from before we started recording. I'd love to hear about what still resonates about that upbringing.
Well, the thing that most resonates to me now is, and I think a lot of us go through this, it's not exactly my small town, although that's a part of it, but it's about my cultural identity being there because I am half Muskogee Creek on my father's side from the Thapako tribal town. There are only about 1,000 of us in Thapako. And on my mom's side, I'm Choctaw. So I grew up in what was then called the Muskogee Creek Nation. And although the Choctaw Nation is about one county over, to me, it was like going to Mars. I knew nothing about the Choctaws or the language or the history. So I look like them. But again, it was like I was on a different planet. So I grew up around a lot of Muskogee people and a lot of white people and a lot of farmers. And that is what draws me back now. The combination of all of them, because, you look at a lot of conservative places, and Oklahoma is certainly a conservative, probably the most conservative state. All counties went for Trump in this past election, the only state. But Native people are pretty liberal. And, I don't know. I'm such a strange combination of things. Because a lot of people on the East Coast, on the coast, are afraid of conservative people. Again, I'm not a conservative person, but I know a lot of conservative people. And when you go to a place like that, there is such harmony between like Native people and white people. It's not even a question. A lot of people are of mixed blood. So I look so fondly back on my father's generation because my father was a specialist in the language. His whole generation spoke the language. So I grew up going to a Muskogee Methodist church out in the country. Everything was done in that language. All the hymns, everything was done in that language. It's the first place I saw somebody play the piano. And my parents, being brilliant as they were, thought my kids need to learn how to function in white society because Indian kids are very quiet and shy. There's something about us that wants to hide from society. And I see that all over the place. And I think it's a protective mechanism, really. So my parents started alternating. They would take us to a white church in town one weekend, then the Muskogee Creek Church, and they would go back and forth. And they were trying to help us assimilate. So in effect, we were raised like first generation immigrants, trying to learn how to be here.
I think you said before we started recording that you were the first person in your family to grow up speaking English.
I'm the first generation in my family. Yeah, my father learned English when he went to school, when he started school. My mother was the same way. So yeah, and when my mother was, she's deep into dementia right now. She's 92, almost 93. But when she was sliding deeper into dementia, she was only speaking Choctaw for a while. So we were raised like first generation immigrants, so they didn't proactively teach us the languages, but they taught us words so we wouldn't embarrass them, because I was always like a quiet but very blunt kid. The few words I would say would just sort of like slap people in the face. So we would learn body parts only in tribal languages. There were many things, like even a fart. I never said the word fart until I was a teenager, and it felt so weird because we would use the Creek word, which is hokshi, which sounds like a fart. And now my husband and I, we use a lot of these words, and it's terrible. If it really smells, we use the Choctaw word, which is honkso. So, a lot of people in New York speak languages, and being in classical music and opera, we both speak Italian, and he's fluent in French, and I can fake some French, and so we'll combine languages, and then we'll throw in like a Muskogee word on the end, or if there's a really a nice looking guy with a great butt walking by, we'll just go masokso, and we know exactly what to do, So I'm so thrilled to have that now. It was a little confusing growing up because I didn't know that I was an Indian when I was a little kid. You watch TV and you see Indians being the villains. I knew I was Muskogee, and that's a different thing because we identify by tribe, and today there are 574 different tribes still in the U.S. And we identify like that's my nation. It's not like I'm white. It's I'm Irish. I'm German. I'm whatever my nation is. So the Indians were something different to me. They were evil. And when I went to my first stomp dance, it was at night and there was a fire, and I started hearing the singing start, and I started crying because I thought the Indians were going to get me. And it was such a big, identity fuck up, really, because it confused me about who I was and what I wanted to be and what I should be. But in the long run, when you go through things like that, it forces you to look at yourself. It forces you to confront yourself and to understand yourself more deeply. And I don't think everybody gets that opportunity. So I'm really, really grateful for all of that.
I don't know how much history you have learned over the years about your tribes, but the journey for your family and your ancestors to Oklahoma, I'd love to know what you know about
well, I know quite a bit because, most people know nothing because it's not taught in this country. So my tribes were originally from, the Muskogees were from northern Florida, Alabama, and parts of Georgia. Alabama is actually a Muskogee word. And we are the same blood, same language as the Seminoles in Florida. It's just that the explorers let them stay, and they forced us onto the Trail of Tears to Oklahoma in the late 1830s. So, we had a lot of treaties with European governments. There's even a statue to the Choctaw people in Dublin, thanking us for the help in the potato famine. So we were very active societies, and then Andrew Jackson came along. You can tell me to shut up whenever, because I can go forever. Andrew Jackson came along in the early 1800s, and he wanted to get rid of all Indian people. Basically, he wanted to eradicate us. And he would talk about the Indian problem. And so they started making it illegal to enter into treaties with Indian tribes, even though it had been happening for years. And then they pushed us into the Trail of Tears along with the Cherokees in the 1830s. So we were all moved to Oklahoma, which was looked at as sort of a wasteland. And in writing, it was called Indian Territory until 1907. And it was supposed to be Indian Territory for all time. It was a permanent deal. But guess what? They found oil in the late 1800s, and things changed again. So they were trying to break up our tribes and to make us into white communities. So they took away our communal aspects. They took away our community land, gave us land allotments, individual land allotments. And this then led to taking land in Oklahoma. And so there was a date and a time when this was going to happen. And the white settlers who cheated and went early were called the Sooners. So that became the Oklahoma Sooners. So we celebrate the Oklahoma Sooners, the cheaters who
Yeah.
took land. Well, in addition to that, something came along called the Dawes Commission, and this is from the U.S. government. And the Dawes Commission, they decided we're going to decide who is and who is not Indian. And so you had to go out and register with the government. They would look at you and say, you look 4/4, you look this. And even if today in 2026, if you are 100% Native American, if you cannot trace yourself to those roles, you are not Native American. And my wallet's in my coat over there. Oh, no, it's right here. I'm going to show you this because everybody, I carry these because I don't want ICE to take me.
Oh, God.
But Americans don't know this. I just talked about it casually, and I'm like, wait, this is natural to us. We all, if you're enrolled in a tribe, a federally recognized tribe, we all have government cards stating our blood quantum because they trace our blood quantum from generation to generation. Because at a certain point, you stop being Indian. You start losing rights, and then you stop being Indian. So even this blood quantum thing that the U.S. government instilled is a slow-burning genocide, you know? So for me, being in classical music, my worlds were completely separate for decades until about 2016 or 17 when I was invited to conduct this opera in Canada called Missing, and it's about the 5,000 missing Indigenous women in Canada and how the Royal Canadian Mounted Police has done so little to help them. It's a heartbreaking opera, and we would always do private performances for the victims' families before we opened it up to the public. These people, they didn't have money, they had no privilege, they'd never been to classical music at all. And you would hear crying beginning in the first minute that would not stop until it was over with sobbing. None of these people ever said, oh my gosh, I've never been to an opera. Nobody ever said, oh, I've never heard contemporary music. They were just gutted by the story and the fact that somebody finally saw them. And despite where I'm from and how I may have felt in my life, I look at these people, they look like me, they look like my family. Except I realized at that point how privileged I was. By a million different miracles, I arrived in this life of privilege, while millions of people like me do not have that. And at that point, I realized, you know what? This has all happened for a reason, because this has given me a platform to talk about being Native to the many, many, many people who know nothing about us. And in my world, I am usually the first and only Native person that anybody knows. So I feel like it is my job to help people to think about us and learn about us. Because if you don't look at us, if you don't know any of us, you don't see us as human. And how can you live in this country, basically on an Indian burial land that was stolen, and not think about it? But that's what most of this country does. They don't give it a second thought. It's just how it is, you know?
I think you said earlier that your first time hearing music was in a church. Is that right?
Well, I have a weird story. That's the first place I saw somebody play piano. But I'm in music because of my mother. My mother her family was destitute in the country in Oklahoma. And then her father died of tuberculosis. And then her mother had no money and remarried this alcoholic white man. And we don't know the story, but she moved out of the house down the road. They're in the country. So my mother and her 3 brothers were left to live on their own. They were children. So they were picked up. She was with one of her brothers, was taken to a boarding school / orphanage in Oklahoma. So she lived there until she was a senior in high school, I think it was. And then she was playing basketball and started coughing up blood. And it turns out she had TB. So she was removed from this boarding school and taken to an Indian tuberculosis sanatorium run by the government. And this was right before treatment had arrived for TB. So it was tribes from all over the country, and they experimented on them. She lost an entire lung and was supposed to never have kids. But the thing that happened for me is that this was in Tallahena, Oklahoma, which is a tiny town in southeastern Oklahoma. And she said everyone listened to country and Western music, and she got sick of the twang. So she found a classical station on the radio and fell in love with Beethoven. So when I was born, the only music I ever heard played was Beethoven. And then I got a toy piano when I was 3, and I wouldn't stop playing that. And so my mom worked as an secretary's aide at the local high school. And she came across this 15-year-old girl, very poor, but she sang and played the piano, and she wanted to start teaching. So I became her very first student, and she would come into our house. And again, this is the beginning of many miracles. And my grandfather was a minister, and somebody had gifted him with this upright piano. So when he died at 4, we moved the piano into our house. This teacher showed up. She didn't have any experience teaching. So and I still have this. She started me on a theory coloring book when I was 5 years old, before I could read words. And my mom knows nothing about music, would read the question, and I would take a crayon and color in the answer on this blank keyboard. So again, my whole introduction to music was back to my mother's generation that came through in my childhood that sort of led me to this teacher, and I became obsessed as a toddler, absolutely obsessed with music and sound, and it was an emotional reaction to me. It wasn't like, oh, that's pretty, or it was never about I like this instrument. It was what it must be like to have like a deep love of cocaine or something, It changed my entire system, and I could not wait to get home to put on certain recordings to get that fix, And so when I started playing the piano, I was slowly learning to create that fix for myself, And I still live in that world. I'm still bowled over by sound and the emotion that it creates. So in many ways, my life is still the same as it was when I was 5, because I'm obsessed with that.
So the obsession was there from an early age.
Oh my God.
But given the context, was it mostly for many years just the love of the medium, or there must have been a point at which you were considering this as something to pursue?
No, I never did. It was so much deeper than that. I would say it's even deeper than the word love. It was so connected to me. It was such a part of me. I never had the thought, should I go into this, or what should I do? I never had that thought. I always knew I had to pursue this. It didn't matter what the end result was going to be, but I had to do this.
Where did that take you? Educationally?
Well, to your couch, I think. Educationally,
just from Oklahoma, from where you were at that time.
Yeah, well, I started with this teacher because again, my first teacher, she was 15 when we started, and when I was 12, I was clearly, precocious and adventurous, and I could do certain things easily. And she didn't have the experience.
Yeah.
She didn't know what to do with me. And to her great credit, she set up an audition for me with the teacher in Oklahoma City, which was an hour and a half away, with the teacher whose students beat her in competitions. She's like, well, this woman's students are all incredible, and I can't beat them, so she must be a good teacher. So she called this teacher, Ernestine Scott, and the teacher said, I'm completely full. I'm not taking students. And my teacher begged her to at least hear me. So we all drove up to Oklahoma City. I remember this day so clearly. I was 12, and she had these 2 Steinway grand pianos next to each other. I'd never seen anything like that. And she was a very serious woman. I mean, I think I'm kind of similar to her now, strangely. And after I played my audition, she said, what day works for you? And she put me at the end of the day because we were driving 3 hours round trip. So she would give me the 2 to 3 hour lessons.
Wow.
And she became like a musical mother to me. From age 12, I was an adult to her, and she expected me to be responsible. And I craved that.
Yeah.
That was so perfect for me. And I did everything she asked of me, and I just started making great progress. And suddenly, I would enter little contests and, I would either do well or do horribly. It was just up to the gods, really.
Mm.
But with her, I started winning competitions, and then you start doing that, and it builds your self-esteem, it builds your confidence. And when somebody who is really hardcore, like she was,
Mm.
believes in you, it's special. And I tell you, she was not one to compliment you either, because if you played a world-class performance, and I was thinking about this just the other day, it's not a surprise. It's what you were planning for.
Yeah.
And, I just got another conducting gig coming up soon that I'm really happy about. And I'm just breaking down the score. I'm like, I want this to be really great. And not everybody does that, but I realized she instilled in me that everything that I do needs to be world-class for me. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, but for me, it needs to be world-class. So I studied with her through undergrad, Oklahoma City University, which was a wonderful music school. And I'm so glad I had her. I played violin in the orchestra. I played oboe in a woodwind quintet. I played violin in the Oklahoma City Philharmonic. And to show you what kind of school it was, in my class was Kristen Chenoweth, the Broadway star. We were in the same class. And then Kelly O'Hara came just a couple of years later. And we had many talented people, not just them. So then I moved to, my teacher had gone to the Eastman School of Music. I'd always revered it. For grad school, I auditioned for 3 schools. I got into all 3, thinking I probably wouldn't get into any.
Yeah.
And I got into Eastman, and I wanted to go. So I went, and I loved it. And again, so music has just sort of carried me throughout, because for a lot of this, I was never thinking, should I do this? Or even, can I do this? I wondered if people would accept me, but whether they accepted me or not, I would have continued doing what I was doing, because it was that necessary for me.
For people that are not familiar with the musical education, especially at a university or graduate level, tell me about Eastman, what it represents in the country. You use the word revere there.
Well, yeah, it's one of the top music schools in the country, if not the world. And it's a very high level. And when I got to school there, as a grad student, I lived in the dorm the first year because I knew nothing. And there were a group of us grad students who lived in the dorm, and we would eat dinner. And I remember I would have practiced 3 hours one day, and I'd be so happy about that, because I didn't always do that. And I'd sit down and say, I'm going to practice 3 hours, and somebody would practice 7 hours. This one girl once practiced 11 hours. I'm like, and coming from small town Oklahoma, there were a lot of people who had studied with famous teachers, people who had 9-foot concert grands in their apartments. Privilege, I thought, there's no way I will ever catch up to these people. I don't even know how to practice more than 3 hours a day. Well, I eventually practiced 6 to 7 hours a day and upped the ante for myself because of my peers. Everybody was working hard. Everybody wanted to be great. And so that boosted me as well. And that helped me to sort of, I think a lot of us have much greater abilities than we know we have. And at Eastman, I learned that my abilities were much greater than I had given myself credit for. So I learned a lot there in terms of personal things, belief in myself. I don't know that I learned a lot musically, but I learned a lot from my peers and just being in that environment. Because you can't do anything without confidence, and if you don't grow up with confidence all around you, then you question. And again, music is what boosted me that whole time.
Was there a point when a future in this world began to crystallize in terms of what you might like to do with this deep passion, love, whatever the word is?
Last year, maybe? I don't know. No, because I never had goals. I grew up playing about 10 instruments, piano being the main one. And I had this proclivity. I could learn instruments really, really easily. And I loved them. For example, I learned violin because when I was in junior high, I heard a recording of this Belgian violinist, Zeno Francescatti, playing the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto. And I remember this one 4-bar phrase between the second and third movements were just making me crazy. They were incredible. What was happening? And I didn't want to learn to play the violin. I wanted to experience playing that phrase. So again, my very first piano teacher had an old beat up violin in her closet with a beginner's book. So she gave that to me. So I taught myself how to play, and I was playing oboe. So I taught myself basics on that. And then I practiced playing with the recording of the Bach-Brandenburg F major concerto on the oboe part, on the violin. So these were all my toys. I didn't play with toys. I didn't play with puzzles because I was always doing this stuff. And so I was always doing something. I would learn an instrument for the love of it, of the music. And when you do that, you kind of skip a billion steps that everybody else has to go through. You don't know what the difficulties are because you're so obsessed with being able to experience this one thing. So I grew up playing a lot of instruments, and people get ideas in their head. You know, people think a lot of things about you, musicians, about what you should be, what you shouldn't be. I was once told by somebody very prominent that I should be an oboist professionally. People saying don't do the piano. Other people assuming I should be a conductor. But I didn't have any desire. I just wanted to keep playing better and better. And so I kind of just went day by day, week by week, year by year, and opportunities started to appear. I started coaching opera, and I was really good at super complicated contemporary scores. And as I tell my conducting students, so much is about perception. What do people think you are? And when you can do complicated music as a pianist, people assume you have other abilities like conducting. So I started getting conducting offers, and I could not conduct. I had no talent for it. I had no ability to do it. But I was getting conducting offers and not piano offers. And I sucked for years. And I would go from gig to gig, sucking just a little bit less every time, feeling tortured because I didn't have the words to speak to an orchestra. I didn't have the conducting technique to communicate there either. So I felt like I'd had a musical stroke. So I gave myself for years permission to quit that. So I know I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and it probably was not until my late 40s or even 50s when it seems like a life had appeared for me that I hadn't even been conscious of, and suddenly I had very nice gigs and things that I like. I'm turning things down, and people reaching out to me, and growing up in music, you also tend to model yourself after other people, and I had to let go of that because I really like my life, and it's unlike anybody else's. My combination of jobs is unlike anyone else's, and it's truly me. So I never had that overarching goal of being something. I just kept following the path. But here's the other thing that I didn't understand until my 40s and 50s through therapy. I didn't realize the many neurodivergencies I had. And just to name a few, I've been a major sleepwalker since a child, both sleepwalking, regular sleepwalking, and sleepwalking with night terrors.
Oh, man.
I've also had this sleep recognition issue, which went away, but I would wake up in the middle of the night and not be able to, I wouldn't recognize my husband. I'd get right over his face and have no idea who he was. And so I would change rooms because it felt uncomfortable.
Whoa.
I also have a facial recognition issue. So much so that I had, in August, I had beers with a director at Eastman, a wonderful director, and who I really like and I know well. We were sitting outside having beers, and I walked in 15 feet to the bar to pay. And as I'm waiting to pay, this man starts talking to me. I'm like, well, he's nice. You know, people are nice. And then he starts mentioning the semester, and I'm just so confused. And I said, oh, do you teach here in Rochester? And then he gave this response, and I'm like, oh my God, it's Octavio. And I had not recognized him. In addition to that, I grew up with extreme perfect pitch, which is problematic when it's extreme because it has to be in pitch. If somebody comes and hums a phrase to you and it's one half step off, it's not the piece. I don't have that same shackle on me now, but back then I did. And I also grew up with something called synesthesia, which is most people are color and sound. For me, it's visual to sound. So I used to play with my Hot Wheels and Matchbox cars. My parents just thought I was a really good kid because I would sit in my room in silence for hours with these cars in front of me, but I was listening to them audition for me because based on their color, shape, and matte, it denoted timbre. And as I got older, I collected and created around 200 to 300 names from throughout the world. And this sounds crazy, and I hid these things for years because I did not understand that neurodivergencies are gifts.
Yeah.
And so I would take a Saturday, I can still feel the feeling of it. And it was fantastic. I would take like a whole Saturday afternoon. I would choose maybe 100 of these names to audition for me. They were violinists by now from throughout the world. And I thought, how unfair that I, Tim Long, decide on my own the order of them, because they would audition and I would order them. I would give them scores and order them. So I divided myself into 5 different people with 5 different preferences in terms of music and playing. And I would listen to them play in silence, mind you, but their name would tell me what the vibrato was like, how they held the violin, how they used the bow, and the pieces that they would choose. And it was all visual. So the visual name would tell me this. And then I would listen to them, give them 5 different scores, go through, like I say, maybe 100. That would take hours. This is all in silence. It's all in my head. At the end of the day, I would take my calculator and calculate all the scores. And it was like the greatest Christmas that has ever existed in this universe. And it was all in my head. And I still have synesthesia. I just have to be conscious of it, because I realized that the spellings and shapes of names were affecting me. Like I would elevate a name in my head, its quality beyond what it actually was, or I would hear something as less than it was because the name would repulse me, or the spelling would, or the shape of it would. So I grew up with all of these things, which kind of now explain why I was so deeply obsessed with music from a young age, because it was not just ears and liking something or just playing and liking the praise. It was all encompassing, like my entire body, all of my emotions. It took over everything. And I think that's also what has kept me going all of these years. No matter what happens, I require it, you know?
You mentioned earlier that when you started getting these conductor offers, that you sucked.
Oh, it was horrible.
What is the inverse of that? Conductors that have a lot of natural talent, to do that from the jump, what does that look like?
I think the conductors that have a lot of natural talent have natural people skills. Okay. Really. Because, we were talking about this earlier. I think the biggest thing that you have to do as a conductor is you have to lead. Like Jim Jones, as we were saying. You have to lead great numbers of people without question. You cannot question yourself. You do not. And, if you're doing it really well, you have the best interests in mind, because people get into mob mentalities. It's just what humans do. So orchestras may look at you, singers may look at you. They don't give you smiles. They don't show you approval when they like things. They give you stone cold faces. And some orchestras will try to test you as well. And as a conductor, it's your job to remain yourself no matter what is thrown at you. And that's what is not often taught when you're learning how to do it. I didn't know any of this stuff because I was a loner. I love being by myself, and I had no people skills. And I think in the end, that was the problem, because I played all the instruments. I played in orchestras many times. I'd played under conductors many times, but I didn't know how to talk to people. And it took me years to do that. And I'm finally at a place where I'm just like I am right here with you when I'm in front of a group conducting, and it feels just as comfortable.
Was that you just getting more comfortable with yourself in front of people? What do you attribute that growth to?
Well, part of it was I got better incrementally, but it was still very painful. It took years for me. I don't know why I kept getting opportunities, but I did. And where I taught at Stony Brook, I got to conduct. So that was very safe. So I could practice there a lot. But the thing that really did it for me, in 2010, I got fired from a job, a prominent job. And up until that point, things were going okay. I didn't love it, but I was getting gigs, and there were sort of expectations of me from my mentor, who was very kind to me, but expectations to follow his path, which was very traditional. But I never really connected, and I really wasn't getting inside. And I got fired. I think partially I wasn't ready for it, but it was also a political thing. It was a really big brouhaha. And when you go through something like that, it crushes everything. You're humiliated. You doubt everything about yourself. But again, for me, I knew that there was something more for me. Because I knew how music felt. I knew that incredible rush, that dopamine rush that came into me that I was not getting in conducting. So I took everything apart. I relearned how to look at a score, how to take apart a score, how to find emotion in a score. I took everything apart and rebuilt it. And I remember I went to a gig. I was doing a magic flute somewhere. And first of all, I did an Italian opera, and it was like 1 year after I was fired, and I was so nervous. I prepared more than I'd ever prepared in every way. It went okay, but I didn't have the confidence, because confidence means a lot, just like people skills. And then I got to a magic flute where it's like all my anal, just absolute study was suddenly paying off, even though I wasn't sure it would, and it just went so well. And then I knew I was on the right path. And that really turned things around for me, because I just explored that path even more. In every score I devoured, I found symbolism, or I would create symbolism. I would create deep meaning with every aspect of it. And this sounds just really crass, but I talk about it like a dog marking its territory. It doesn't matter if it is its territory, but if you mark it, it is, you think of it as your territory. If I go through every square inch of a score and give it meaning, then suddenly it is mine, you know? And I was able to get to a point where it became like the synesthesia with my cars, with listening to Zeno Francescatti playing Mendelssohn, to listen to one of my favorite pieces. I had an 8-track tape of this when I was a little kid. This sounds ridiculous for a kid from Oklahoma, but Respighi's arrangement of Rossini's songs that were called La Boutique Fantasque, which became a ballet. And when I would put that music on when everybody left the house, I cannot tell you, it was like I was shot to the moon. And I was finally, after years, able to get to that place with conducting, you know? And now I'm at a place, I don't get nervous, because I've had the worst happen to me and I'm still here. But I'm also a strong believer that if you're going to have, in something ephemeral like music, a music performance, if you're going to allow the possibility of something absolutely great to happen, you also have to accept that bad can happen as well, because we can't control life. Things happen. So you have to be open to it all to achieve the best, you know? And I dare say I'm not happy about being fired still. It's a terrible experience to go through. But without that, I don't know that I would have changed trajectories like I did and found what I found.
Is it fair to say in the world of orchestras, if in your world, that the conductor, that's the top of the food chain? That's what most people dream of becoming? Or is that not necessarily status-wise, competence-wise, regarded in such a way?
It's a combination of all of that. I think, and sometimes the greatest conductors are sociopaths because they don't care what people think and they want to dominate, you know? And there are plenty of conductors who actually don't know a lot. And then there are genius conductors out there too. So it's probably like any business, a lot of people do aim for the stars in a career, and some of them by sheer will can get their will in politics and just playing the game can get really far. And then there are other people. I'm covering at the Met right now on Madame Butterfly. And I'm so, this conductor I'm covering, Marco Armigliato, he's an Italian, he's a genius. He has, operas are long. He's got every opera that he's ever done completely memorized. He does not travel with scores. I asked him, did you bring a Butterfly score to New York? He said, I don't know where it is. It's absolutely up there with photographic memory mixed with other things. And with my neurodivergencies, I'm often the odd one out, but when I'm around somebody like Marco, I'm normal, which I love.
I'd love to hear you talk about New York, what New York has meant to you in your career. And usually the listeners for the show they're like me, they're lovers of the arts, but they're not experts. I'd love to hear about anything you might like to share about your experience over the years related to New York, what New York means globally to you.
That's an interesting question. Well, I first have to say, I know people have sort of certain conceptions about classical music, and I'm just not like that. Because again, even the way I talk about music is not anything about being elevated or elitist or even learned in any way. It's more like a drug for me. It really is. It really is like a drug for me. So
it sounds psychedelic in many ways.
It completely is. I mean, even my voice changes when I talk about it, because I still have this deep addiction to it. And I want everybody to have that addiction. And that's why I teach the way I do, because my kids don't know that you can be addicted to something so fantastic.
Yeah.
But for me, again, moving to New York was not about a dream of achieving anything. I kind of, I had only come out 2 years before that, and it was a very scary thing for me. So coming to New York was a place that I knew people, but I could also be anonymous. So I felt freer to be myself. So I spent years being wild, just partying and drinking and going out and having sex. And I lived a wild life, and I don't regret one bit of it. I have such fond memories of it all. And it also, when you go through things like that, you're basically trying to figure yourself out.
Yeah.
You're trying to understand this part of yourself that you have denied for so long. And I think some of us have to go through that. And I think it empowered my music because it empowered my understanding of myself. And I've always had this desire to understand things deeply. And I started looking into certain writers in the late 90s when I was still very wild, but I would journal and read these things and learn so much about the universe and life. And New York was just a playground for me in every way. I would see brilliant musicians. I'd be around normal people. I would see sexy people. It was just freedom here. And it's always been freedom to me, no matter where I've gone. And this sounds crazy to a lot of people who've never been here, but when I get to New York, I feel like I can finally breathe. It's and now it just feels completely like home. And I know so many people here, so many musicians here. When I go to the Metropolitan Opera, I have reunions with people from 1992 through now. I mean, there are two people there I've known since 92. We met at the Aspen Festival as students. So I have a billion reunions, and it feels like the greatest high school reunion I've ever had. I have so much fun there, and I have great confidence there, and they're very nice to me. And so I really do feel like a part of New York, but not in that kind of flashy, fancy way, in a very kind of down-home way. Because I think what people don't know about living here is that when you live here, you kind of carve out your own small town.
Yes.
You don't take in the whole thing. You certainly don't take in Times Square or the Statue of Liberty. But you do your little town, and you love that little town. And I'm definitely that with New York. And I think it will always be my home along with Oklahoma,
I think we were talking about this before the recording as well. I think you said you came out in 2002.
No, I met my husband in 2003. I came out in 1992.
And to your point from earlier, before we started recording, a very different time.
Oh, good Lord. People don't know. People aren't conscious of this, but even 2003 when I met my husband was a very different time for gay people. Well, think about growing up in Oklahoma in the 70s and 80s. And, I can't point to one person because it was society That's what society was at that point. That's what religion was at that. That's what religion still is in many places.
Yeah.
That's what our government was at the time. Reagan didn't talk about AIDS for 3 years. Government officials in interviews were making jokes and laughing about gay people dying of AIDS. So to me, the way I felt was the day I hit puberty was the day AIDS came out in the news. And growing up in the Bible Belt, you inflict such damage on yourself. I tried to figure myself out the way I did with music. Like when I attack music, it's all encompassing, 100% of me devoted to that cause. Well, I did that same thing with religion, trying to pray the gay away. And I still have that Bible where I took notes, Leviticus, and I would write AIDS in the column. This is why AIDS is here. I was completely my worst enemy, just inflicting damage and shame and guilt. And I was not able to come out until I left Oklahoma. And I was kind of, I was both excited by seeing gay people in Oklahoma because it was a big musical theater school, but I was also terrified of gay people, the out ones. Because it was just, I was afraid they would see me.
Yeah.
Which is horrible.
Yeah.
Because really, what we all need in life is to be seen, And I'm just so fortunate to have gone through everything that I've gone through to finally be at this place where I actually love being seen in all aspects,
You've talked a couple times about being blunt, even as a kid.
Yeah.
Was there many years post-puberty where you were in denial about being gay? Was that always something you knew, but you were trying to change about yourself?
Well, I'm an extreme person. So, just to open up entirely here, I started having sex at 14 with men, with adults. But I was so closeted and deeply in denial about that. So I had a complete divide in my mind that would happen. And I would feel the opposite of how I talk about music. Deep shame and just horrible feelings about myself and such regret. And I would go into praying and the Bible, and then it would happen again. And I'd go through this process through high school. And then I went deeply, my parents didn't do this. I went to a Baptist church on my own my senior year. We'd moved to Norman, which is a bigger city than my small town. And because the Southern Baptists are, there are many words you could call them, really, but it aligned with my need to destroy myself, really. And I was like a zealot. And that's why, when I see zealots now, I know how they feel. I know why they can ignore facts because I remember that feeling. But, for me, I was more devout than anybody around me because that's just sort of how I go. I go all in. And it got to the point where when I was praying, I got sort of a sense of peace that I was okay. And that's not what society said, and that's not what church said. And so I realized then that was not my place. Because if you were to ever tell anybody that, they would say, that's not God speaking to you. But there are a billion gods in this country, the way people talk, But it gave me peace. It gave me a chance to sort of relax a little bit. I still couldn't come out. But it gave me at least released that gun to my head that I'd put up myself. And when I moved away from Oklahoma, it released a bit too, because these people didn't know me in Rochester.
Yeah.
And I could create myself again. But still, when you go through years of just partying and all that, that's still basically trying to accept yourself, So it took me a while. And again, conducting helped because I had a certain thought one year. It's like people love to not like conductors. People want to be led, but I'm conducting brilliant people, really talented, brilliant people, and really talented, brilliant people don't want to be led by an idiot. So it's like they're very discerning about conductors. And I finally realized, what? As a conductor, a large segment is always going to not like me, and a segment will like me, no matter what I do. So if that's the case, then why should I care what I do? Well, I should just do what I think is right and what makes me happy. So I started doing that as a conductor. They're going to think what they think. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I dropped all of that. And that's when I stopped getting nervous in any way. And that, of course, bleeds over into your life.
Yeah.
You start accepting everything about your life. People are going to think what they're going to think. And I'm just going to truly be myself. And that kind of finally aligned with who I think I really am. Because I said to you before, for better or worse, I cannot not tell the truth,
Yeah.
And I think that's true about myself now as well. It wasn't always that way, but that's the gift I was given, that I was able to sort of make that whole.
Did you have a big coming out moment? Was it a gradual process where you were open with your family, with your friends?
Oh, Lord, no. No. It was friends at first, and then I dated a professor, which,
that'll do it.
Yeah, that'll do it. Because you don't have to say, hey, I'm gay. It's like everybody knows. And it's like, what the hell is going on there? I don't regret that either, No, it was spread out over a long period. And, with my parents, they treated me like an adult, which is what I wanted. I never wanted to be treated like a child. So we had a little bit of a formal relationship, not cold, just a little bit formal. And so I didn't really talk about my feelings a lot with them. And I think, Indian people don't do that a lot anyway, especially back then. So it wasn't until I met Chris, my now husband, in 2003, and I was conducting an opera in Boston, and he was in grad school at Harvard. And my mom wanted to come up to see the opera. And I'm like, shit. And this was the beginning of email. And I remember I was going to dinner with like 3 people, including Chris. And I just wrote my mom and I said, when you come here, you're going to meet somebody that's very special to me. And we met here and we've been seeing each other this long, and he makes me very happy. That's all. I didn't say I'm gay, nothing like that. And I was so nervous. And she wrote me back like immediately, saying that she had always worried that I might not meet somebody for myself. And she was so happy that I finally had somebody. It was beautiful.
That's sweet.
And then she asked me, can I tell your dad? I'm like, I wasn't ready. And I mean, my dad was very, very straight, a very kind of, I don't know, macho, but masculine leader type of a person, very clear in his thoughts and very, he strongly believed in his thoughts because he was meticulous as well in looking at himself. And I said, no, don't tell him. But if he asks, you can say something. Well, I talked to her a week later. She said, I told him. And then my dad started calling me on the phone. I wouldn't answer. And I finally picked up, and they called me Chaban or Ban, which means boy or son in the Muskogee language. So if you go to a Muskogee event and you yell Chaban, every male in the room will look from age 1 through 90. So he said, Ban, your mom told me what you told her, and I just want you to know it's okay. You're my son, and you'll always be my son, and I'll always love you. It was beautiful. So Chris, spent several Christmases with them too. And it was more than I could have ever hoped for, really.
Wow. Maybe another little miracle there.
Oh, again, many, many miracles in my life. Many.
Incredible. I like to close these conversations by talking about how artists think about success. You've talked a lot about many little miracles and successes you've had in your life and your career. When you look at your future now, how do you think about that word for yourself and for your life, your profession? What does that word mean to you?
Well, I mean, there are 2 things here. You were talking about what artists think about success. I have a hard time calling myself an artist, because I always, again, I think of myself as just this grain that has access to this amazing being called music that provides all this energy and knowledge, but I am not that. So I don't think of success in terms of being a musician. I think of truth. And I think truth leads to things. On another level, when I step out of being a musician and just look back at my life, I'm shocked. I never dreamed I would have 1/10 of what I have in life. I didn't have that belief. I didn't know it was possible. And so I'm so content with what I have. And I'm just thrilled when more things come along, because it could end now and I'd be like, man, I'm proud of what I've done, And then more things happen. I'm like, that's just crazy. It's like more and more icing on the cake, and I love icing, and I feel fortunate, and I'm just so happy about it all, and I want to share it all. And I have this foundation too, the Plimpton Foundation, and we created the North American Indigenous Songbook, where we commission Native and First Nations composers to write pieces. So we're going to Europe next fall. We're going to be here in New York again. And we do annual commissions. So thus far, between that and the Moab Festival and commissioning an orchestral piece at Eastman, I've commissioned 21 compositions now by Native composers, Native artists. And that's a big part of my goal with the foundation. We're commissioning pieces and we're giving scholarships to Native musicians. In addition, I've been asked to compose. So I'm in the middle of writing something. It's a combination story of the Haudenosaunee creation story called Sky Woman, who falls from the sky, a hole in the sky into the water. A turtle comes to save her and the animals help her. And it creates Turtle Island, which many natives call North America, Turtle Island. We're combining and juxtaposing that with my mother's writing about being in the boarding school and that sanatorium. And it's both about, because we're matrilineal, it's about loss and survival and ascension. And the working title of this is called Sky Mother. And the plan now is to have the premiere, I think, in 27 here in New York, and then go to Philadelphia and a couple of other places. So I feel so fortunate again that I'm finally at this place where it's come full circle. I can combine all of my identity as a Native person with being a musician, and being the musician kind of fuels that part of myself and elevates it. So for me, that's success, that I'm even able to do these projects and that I'm at a place where I can help other people too.
How did your foundation come about and why did you start it?
Well, it came about during the pandemic because my father-in-law, Randy Plimpton in Rochester, we were up having scotch. It was probably about 2 a.m. We were having scotch and talking. And we were just talking. People had asked me about songs by Native composers, and I didn't really know any. And we were talking about that. I said, we should commission some. And he said, I'd be willing to put some money into it. So we talked about that. And then we thought, well, why not start a foundation for this? So we literally, we had 10 world premieres at National Sawdust. This was in the fall of 2024. It was a sold out audience, packed to the rafters. It was a fantastic night. We had 14 tribes represented between composers and performers. Started out with the great Native flutist Carlos Nakai, such a charismatic king. He was fantastic. Then, and I kind of narrate this concert as well. Then we had our premieres, and then we ended with the great Martha Redbone and her soul funk band. My only instructions to Martha were to tear the roof off the building. Because, with Native issues, people can feel sad, they can feel guilty, and I didn't want any of those, but I wanted to tell the truth. I gave a couple of speeches. So it started out really profound with Carlos Nakai. Then we had our premieres, which were so varied, because I want to show how we're not a monolith, how natives are so varied in personality and experience. And then I wanted to end with Martha just making the place feel fantastic. And everybody was on their feet, rocking out with her. And it was just a tremendous night. So I was thrilled about that. We're going to be at Perlman Performing Arts Center, I think, at the end of January of 27 this next season. Yeah.
Tim, this was such a pleasure. Thank you. Your story is incredible. I'll remember this one.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you too.
Likewise. Thank you, man.